And so so clearly shorts for you have been a fabulous training ground to learn your craft and also create calling cards. But let's just talk about what you learned on those shorts that allowed you to progress into features as a powerful storyteller.
Well, I think when you're making a low budget or guerrilla style film, there's not as many restrictions or constraints because you are the boss. You know, you've blagged the things, you've got the equipment, you can usually kind of shoot for as long as you want. So you really have to focus. It allows you to focus your creativity and understand how to shoot a story with limited resources. You then take that to a feature film, and I actually have to say, I think making a feature film, the films I've made now are in the budgets of sort of $3 to $4 million, and it's almost more constraining making a film under those budget constraints because time and money become factors that have severe consequences if you go over. For example, you know, on a feature film, if I go over by if I pass overtime, if I go past 7 when we wrap, you know, that costs £5,000. If we go over by a day, that costs £35,000. So there are real financial consequences to that kind of a budget level. And I think coming from a discipline where you're used to not having many resources, it really allows you to understand how to shoot a film, get your coverage, tell the story, know what you need, and do it perhaps economically, but with no loss of storytelling.
Right. So just to be clear, if you hadn't gone back and made those shorts, you would not be in a position that you're in right now.
Correct. Correct. You know, I think everyone has said it on your show, you have to take action. And my philosophy is, if you don't buy a lottery ticket, you can't win the lottery.
Right.
You know, the second you do not buy that ticket, it's game over.
Yeah.
The second you sit and wait, it's over.
I mean, I think this leads into one of the most important aspects as well, is that you're obviously a writer-director, but really you're a producer. Even though you're not really credited and you're not raising the money, you're a hustler and you're a networker and you're producing, you're doing all of that side of the filmmaking business as well, which is one of the areas that many other filmmakers, I don't want to do that. They choose not to do it for whatever reason. But do you think that's a major factor in what makes a successful filmmaker?
I think initially, yes. I think when you're at the stage where you're for all of us filmmakers, there's a very large brick wall in front of us, and it's got many layers, and we're just slogging away at it. You know, you and I and all of our friends, we've been doing this for so many years, and we're banging this brick wall, trying to carve a path into it. And I think part of it of producing your own stuff is not allowing someone else to control your own destiny. It's having a bit more control over your future and your destiny and what happens. And you know, I mean, we sat in a cafe a few years ago and we came up with this formula for success. I don't know if you remember it.
Oh, yeah,
it's a triangle. Our formula was, you know, success is at the top of the triangle. And on one side you've got luck, and on the other side you've got talent and experience, and then you've got the one thing on the bottom which makes those things become
It's hard work, basically.
It's
energy.
action. It's action, yeah. It's the continued application of action which creates more luck, more opportunity, and increases your experience. And it's the continued continued action in the face of rejection which allows you to push through and eventually achieve your goals.
Right. So how have the two? I mean, basically you made the Finkles, and then extraordinarily, you kind of got the phone call to say, "What are you doing tomorrow?"
Yeah, yes, it's nuts, really. So we're actually still in post-production on Swinging with the Finkles. I was cutting it in, this was January, February, and Deepak calls me and says, "Oh, well, first of all, he always said, look, I'm a fan of Foster, let's try and crack." I couldn't think how to develop it into a feature film. So he and I had many conversations, and finally I cracked the structure of it. And confronted with an overwhelming fear in November that I'll never make another feature film again, I went off and wrote another feature film. I was in 3 weeks in post-production, and I started writing the feature Foster. Because I think it's true, when you finish a film, even like as an actor, any creative person knows, you feel like you're never going to work again. So I went off and I wrote Foster, and he and I were working on it. And then come February, he's like, okay, an opportunity has arisen. We can make Foster. However, you have to start shooting it by March 29th. So you have to start pre-production tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. So literally, we started pre-production the next day. And I had virtually had the same crew intact, the same heads of department from Finkel's, the same line producer. So it was fairly easy to jump straight back into that rhythm. But very, very challenging. And incredibly, it came together. And I think there's something, I think it was you, I remember reading once on your blog something about laser focus, about short periods of time which allow you to really concentrate your focus. And I think that's very true. You know, so we had 6 weeks to cast it and get that film made. And that focus has really created something extraordinary. And we've got a really special little film.
Right, right. So, what's been the toughest aspects to making these films in this really confined kind of process? I mean, you know, to go from I want to get on set to making a film to suddenly you're making a film. Oh, now we're making another one. How's that journey? You know, how's that impacted on you?
Oh, you know, I'm taking it in my stride. I'm not taking it for granted. I still live in fear that tomorrow it's going to end. That when I finish this film, no one's going to like it. You know, there's those stages of production, and I think any artist or someone who creates something, once you give it to the world to see and judge and criticize, you become very vulnerable, and it's a very exposing feeling. So while I'm not taking it for granted, you know, I'm just hoping that the journey will continue.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, Johnny, as you know, you are the final interview in the Guerrilla Filmmaker's Pocketbook, because it's such an inspiring read. We knew as soon as we had it in that this had to be the very last interview. So if you want to hear more of Johnny's wisdom, it's in the Guerrilla Filmmaker's Pocketbook.